Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a nice Tuesday afternoon. Corstian is back in his hometown. Well, not his hometown, but neighbor town, Plainfield. I am here in my home now, Michigan. Um, Very exciting draft. Lots of coverage, like biggest turnout in the draft I think we've seen in Detroit. Lots of funny
hmm
content. I was watching the Pat McAfee show the entire time. Bill Belichick was amazing, breaking down prospects and whatnot. But like before we get any further, Corstian, how did you enjoy the draft?
it was pretty exciting. Um, Obviously, like it was that first round was pretty crazy. All those offensive players getting picked. Like I saw a hot take. Someone said on like Twitter or whatever, saying that they predict over 20 players will be offense in the first round, and like, I mean, and when you do the math, you're like that's seems pretty likely, and then it actually happens, and you're like that's actually an insane draft. And then you think about how the teams that won defense with in the first round got insane value off of guys that I think in previous years, are likely top 10, draft capital type picks end up going late in the first round or mid first round. And so I think it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, lots of unexpected moves per se. A lot of debate on like Michael Penix being taken by Atlanta at 8, and then I'm sure he'll be discussed as we go through our players list later down the line. But Corsan and I have something interesting planned. We are going to be talking about landing spots, which were our favorite landing spots for specific players. And Corsan has a list of 5. I have a list of 5, and then we're going to go into which teams that we thought won the draft basically or had the best draft based on their draft classes. So Corsian has a list of 3. I have a list of 3. And um, Corsian, ready to jump into it?
I am ready.
All right. Who's at number 5 for you? Not that it's in any order.
Yeah. One of the guys off my list is Cooper DeJean, taken by the Eagles. I think uh, this was a great value for them. Especially, I really liked the fact that they doubled down here on cornerback, especially like with secondary being a big part of, I guess, just a big weakness. And a lot of people, I think, had DeJean as a first round grade as well. And so just being able to trade up, get him in that second round, just to kind of really show that you're invested in developing and getting a better secondary was something that I was really excited to see.
Yeah. Ditto. And especially with the Eagles, this was a second pick they made in the draft after picking Kenyon Mitchell. So they revamped that secondary really quickly. He is an excellent corner. He can play on the outside. He can play in the slot. He can thrive wherever. He's like a force multiplier for that defense. And I think the Eagles defense is going to be scary next season just with
Mhm.
those two additions alone. And you think about like the two cornerbacks that they had with Bradbury and Slay, that was thought to be like the strength of their lineup, and they turned out to be the weakest coverage defenders last
Mhm.
season. That was a major weakness for the Eagles. I think a lot of onus was on the offense not as being as efficient enough, but you could argue the defense was a major reason why like Philadelphia like had that slide to end the season that was so disappointing. So,
Mhm.
um, great pick, great spot at number 5. I'm 100% on board. I think that was a great landing spot for Cooper. All right.
Who's your
My
guy?
number 5 spot. Um, he was taken in the first round, and I was a little bit surprised that the Bills traded the pick to this team for them to make the move to do so. But it's Xavier Worthy to Kansas City. That was just unbelievable. Like they did it again. They got what they want to do on offense aggressively now. And it's hard to believe that they won a Super Bowl without like with changing their identities entirely. But now they've opened the floor up. Um, it to me, this pick really doesn't matter like what happens with Rasheed Rice, because now
Mhm.
they have Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy and
Mhm.
Travis Kelsey. So now you have like 3 guys to worry about as a defense where you're stretched out thin, and the Chiefs can pretty much run any scheme they want to now because they have the personnel to do it. Now, the key thing is they got to stay healthy, but on paper, this is a great move for them. I think Xavier Worthy is out of the gate. He's going to be better than Tyreek Hill from the standpoint that he can win over the middle, he can make catches over the middle well. And like
Mhm.
Hill had to learn and develop in that area, but he was so extraordinary outside the numbers and like streak routes, post
Mhm.
routes, and whatnot, that it wasn't so much as a necessary ball point. But for Worthy, he already has that inside game. So I think he has a leg up on Tyreek Hill, like when he started with the Chiefs in that regard.
Mhm.
But he's still a burner on the outside. He's not so much like he's not the next Tyreek Hill. He's like a better version of Deshaun Jackson, I want to say,
Mhm.
because Deshaun Jackson couldn't win on the inside um like Xavier Worthy could in college. So I really like that landing spot for the Chiefs.
Mhm. Yeah, I thought that was an insane pick for them. The fact that the Bills traded down, I was laughing so hard. I'm like, you're joking. Like, if I would never trade with the Chiefs if I was the Bills, like, but no.
Yeah, I mean, it's in that context, yeah. After all their playoff bouts and the Bills like lose and they come so close every single time, where they're you could see they're on par with the Chiefs,
Mhm.
and then you're like, oh, if I'm a GM, why would you make a move like that? But I think they took the emotion out of it. If you look
Mhm.
at the Bills like cap situation and how they had to manage that with like Diggs and cutting
Mhm.
all their veterans and stuff, the move makes sense to add more
Mhm.
draft picks and whatnot. And the Bills also had a good draft as well, so
Mhm.
I didn't mind that too much. It's just like um obviously you hate the Chiefs being a Broncos fan.
Mhm.
I'm like I want to it's more like I want to see somebody else win. I don't want to see the
Mhm.
Chiefs keep dominating all the time because then all the build up to that Super Bowl is kind of meaningless to me. There's
Mhm.
no like true competition. So like I'm hoping for the Ravens or like the Bengals to make a statement next season
Mhm.
that's saying,
Yeah.
no, the Chiefs aren't head above everybody else. This is the context of what happened and we're gonna do something about it.
Mhm.
But it's a lot harder now when you got Xavier Worthy and Marquise Brown
Mhm.
compared to last season's atrocity of weapons. So
Mhm.
that's why I like Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs. Who's number 4 for
Mhm.
you?
Here I got Marshawn Nealand going to the Cowboys, that edge player that I was talking about during our mock drafts. I had him going in the early, like the middle second round. He went just around there, so I guess it was a good find on my part for a guy that we didn't really know where NFL teams really saw him. But like I said, he's big guy, but he's also incredibly agile for his size, and even just in general, he's a pretty you know agile player, being like 270 or something, and just him being there as well. He's not like forced to be the number one pass rusher for the Cowboys. He has time to get better at his craft, and like he already has like all the physicals that you kind of dream of from an edge rusher down, and so he just kind of has a lot of time to get up, to get better, become an elite pass rusher on the other side, and really be a potential top pass rush duo with Micah Parsons in Dallas.
Yeah, I love the move for Dallas. They lost a couple guys like Dante Fowler and like Dorrance Armstrong, going with Dan Quinn to the Washington Commanders. So I think it's a good move to fortify that. Um, they've been quietly like rebuilding their fronts because losing Tyrod Smith's gonna hurt them.
Mhm.
And then so getting Guyton and getting BB, as
Mhm.
well as Nealon, I think that was great first step in addressing that. Um, it remains to be seen like how that's going to affect the talent ceiling of this roster, but
Mhm.
um, I'm in agreement with you. That was a need that they definitely need to have. You don't want
Mhm.
to run like Micah Parsons and Demarcus Lawrence down the wall because you're playing them every single snap, every single game. So
Mhm.
this guy can learn from the best and keep that machine moving. That is the Cowboys pass rush. Um,
Mhm.
for my number 4, newsflash, another receiver. He's not going to get as much playing time given the talent the roster, but like given the offseason rumors about these teams and like two of their wide receivers on the same team, which one's going to get traded and whatnot. I thought it was a very interesting pick that they made in the first round. But it's Ricky Pearsall to the San Francisco 49ers. Um, 49ers really haven't really had a guy like him. He's not necessarily like a run after the catch threat, and he's a great route runner that's underrated. But like he's more of like a vertical kind of guy where like Brandon Ayuk is like trying to become Devontae Adams. So
Mhm.
he just brings a different element that the 49ers haven't necessarily had and gives them another outside threat so you can really put Debo in the slot and then like
Mhm.
McCaffrey in the slot sometimes and really like wreak havoc there. rather than like force another player there. So like if you look at the contracts coming up, like Debo's in this last year, I think, um, or he has the last year of like guaranteed money, and then Brandon Ayuk's contract's coming up, which is why he's in so many trade talks. And then you got Jawan Jennings, who's I
Mhm.
think he's on his last year as well. So like they're planning for the future, and they believe in Pearsall as a threat. I think he's one of like 10 receivers that are underrated in this class, and
Mhm.
he's going to have an impact. He's going to have an impact, and I think he's going to be there for like 5 to 6 years on this team,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
really keep that going, whether or not like Ayuk or Samuel get traded. So
Mhm.
I really like this landing spot. He might not have the best season coming out this first season, but like I think the future's bright for him on the 49ers.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I like that pick as well. I think it was a good like, especially when you're such a good team, you kind of draft for the future instead of the now a lot of times.
Yeah.
Obviously, when holes show up, you have to fill them, but 49ers are one of those teams that just doesn't seem to have a lot of holes, and it's a lot more luxury. They're a team that definitely is able to take those luxury picks, which I like.
Yeah.
See, my next guy here, guy number 3, I'll have Blake Corum to the Rams.
Ooh, I was thinking about him. He was an honorary mention for me. What do you like about Corum to the Rams?
I think he complements Kyron Williams pretty good here. Where Williams he was phenomenal last season as like the Rams running back, but I think a lot of his strength did lie with him being like pretty good at like being a pass catcher out of the backfield, and so you kind of have a lot more of a physical downhill runner with Blake Corum. I understand the concerns you got with Corum with injuries and kind of just like longevity with him, but I think in the third round, right, you get a guy that can run downhill for you and just kind of create more opportunity for Williams out of the backfield, and then also just create more opportunity for your wide receivers that teams can't just go, nickel or dime packages the entire game in hopes to lock out or lock up Cooper Cup and then Puka Nakua.
Yeah. No, I like this landing spot too because I think he could take over the backfield. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is like, I was a huge fan of Zach Evans last year. I thought
Mm-hmm.
he was going to break out. I was a huge fan of Cam Akers. Like, I really thought those two backs would be the spearhead of the Rams offense, and it turned out to be the one back I didn't like the most.
Mm-hmm.
It was Kyron Williams. So like, it's I don't know what to make of the move from like just dealing with Sean McVay because like
Mm-hmm.
he seems to throw backs away faster than like me throwing out the trash in my apartment. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, um, with that was a bad analogy, but um, with like Corey and Williams, and then like what I think of Zach Evans, you have this like three-headed monster where it's like unclear who's the guy really. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's probably gonna go to Kyron given the production he's had last year, but like the talent level between Corum and Williams, and even between Williams and like Evans, is negligible. Not even that much, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of players saying like Zach Evans should have got more playing time. And this is one of those situations where it's like, okay, you took Corum, but if you're gonna make Kyron Williams the bell cow, like why take him? That makes no sense to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
you might as well have like tried to move up and like fortify your defensive tackles better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this move might signal that like they although they like what they see in Kyron Williams, they're not satisfied with it. And if Kyron Williams has any slippage similar to like what Gurley had and then the off the field issues with like Cam Akers, they have another
Mm-hmm.
guy that can turn to that he made in
Mm-hmm.
Blake Core. So um, that was a good selection from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Third guy on my list, it's the guy Buffalo picked after they traded with the Chiefs. It's Keon Coleman. I really love this move because before they made the selection, Bills didn't have like an outside receiving threat like that. They had Shakir and they had Curtis Samuel, but I don't trust them to line up on the outside against the team's best opposing outside cornerback and go win from time to time. And I really, really like Shakir,
Mm-hmm.
but the best guy to do that before they made the selection was like Dalton Kincaid, and he's kind of like their move tight end. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that would have been ideal. I think this helps Josh Allen a ton when you think about like the amount of like trust he has as receivers. And Keon plays that exact same way. He'll win those 50-50 balls. And it puts Samuel and Shakir in their ideal positions where they can thrive.
Hmm.
Samuel's a slot option. Shakir is like an outside threat that's like sneakily good and can play in the slot as well. And then you got Kincaid as well. So and Keon's like one of my favorite players, like leading up to the draft as well. He kind of slipped for me once I started diving into the wide receivers. But like before pre-draft, he was probably a top 10 receiver on my list as
Hmm.
far as like rookie wide receivers. Like obviously you got Marvin, Neighbors, Adunze, and then like you could take your pick. Like it could be Worthy, McConkey, Thomas, like Pearsall, and then like probably Coleman. And I really I really like this landing spot for him because of the quarterback he gets to play with, and he's going to put up some big numbers year one because his talent level is like as good as anybody on the current roster.
Hmm. um, yeah, a lot of receivers I think had a lot of good landing spots. I mean,
Most of my list is receivers, to be honest. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's like it helps that there's a lot of receivers at least had people rated really highly going into the draft, and so it feels like
Mhm.
no matter where a lot of these receivers went, you could kind of see the vision behind it. And obviously, Bills had a need, and so that makes sense. But like even teams like the 49ers, where this like receiver in the first round is a luxury pick, and over the defensive players that fell, and but so I have a receiver in my list. I'll save that for my last pick maybe, but um,
Okay.
my number two guy here I'll pick is Junior Colson from the Chargers.
Okay.
I think he's probably the top rated off ball linebacker in this class. I mean, there's always debate with like off ball linebackers with being how are they actually able to read an offense and um, play coverage against all elite players basically, but the fact that they were able to get him in the third round after I think two solid picks beforehand, I think he was just a really nice steal, whether or not you think he'll be a great player or not. And so that was just kind of one part of it. I really like the Chargers draft in general, and so obviously a player on their team makes it onto my list of guys that I like.
Yeah. Judah Colson, I love the pick as well, third round. And I'm sure we'll be talking about the Chargers much later. But like Colson just brings like he kind of brings the cleanup that they need behind Bosa, Mack, and then Tui Pelotu, I think. I'm probably butchered his name. But um, like they had the pass rush, and really from like their offensive, from the defensive standpoint, they want a physical linebacker, and Coastal can bring
Mm-hmm.
that, and he's explosive. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at a Kansas City, when you're looking at Las Vegas, and you're looking at what Denver's trying to establish, you're going to need a physical linebacker that can go up and play with those receivers that go on the middle and let them know, hey, you can't just come over the middle whenever you want. I think
Mm-hmm.
Colson's a great physical guy. I think there's a guy that's a Jim Harbaugh type of pick. If you look at what picks he made, like for the majority of this draft, so I really like the landing spot as well. I think it complements what they already have on the defense really well. They have the safeties and they have the pass rush. Now it's about like the secondary layer on their defense to boost up their run defense and their pass coverage with more physical, aggressive style.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Number two for me is also on the same team, a guy who was picked around earlier, Lad McConkey. I think he's going to go in, step in, and be the best receiver on the team right again. And it's supposed to be Quinton Johnson, but you guys know by this point what we think of Quinton Johnson. I think McConkey is a proven guy on the outside who can win. She's not the next Cooper Cup or Hunter Renfro as a player. Get that out of your heads. He's a guy that can win like yards after catch and outside on the boundary. A guy that is going to help like offset the losses of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and it's going to allow Quinton Johnson to be on the inside and be a run after catch threat that he was best known for in TCU. So I really love this move for the Chargers because they don't allocate so many resources um, to in order to make this move. He fell right to them in the second round, and they could move up and get him. And I love this move because of the quarterback he plays with, and the fact that he's going to get immediate production.
Hmm. Yeah, Chargers had a really good draft.
Yeah, I'll
um,
say that for sure.
hmm. Yeah, and so for my number one favorite player landing spot, I think I'm gonna get I not think, but I put Brian Thomas to the Jaguars here.
Okay.
um, I think he has a chance to be, like a true like dominant wide receiver. Like Christian Kirk, he's been playing, phenomenal football, been putting up those numbers, but I don't like he's not like a guy that I feel like strikes fear into defenses like you see Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Cooper Cup do. And I think that Brian Thomas has that kind of potential to be that with Christian Kirk already, putting up his superstar seasons that I think people still vastly underrate. Like he's playing great football. There's a reason why I think they're comfortable moving on from uh, a handful of guys on their team already. They cut Zay
He was
Jones just.
outplaying Ridley for like half the season,
Hmm.
which is why because everybody thought Ridley was the one once he went to the Jaguars. That's
Hmm.
how good Christian Kirk was. But
Hmm. Yeah, but I think he, even if he doesn't, become the superstar dominant guy that I'm hoping that he can become, if he's just a solid number two behind Christian Kirk, I think that's still a phenomenal outcome for them. I think Calvin Ridley, one thing he struggled with was drops or just at least connection with Trevor Lawrence, because I think that was a big part of, I guess, the reason why they were okay letting him go. I know there's other things involving draft picks and how much they were going to have to pay him, but I think there were some misconnections between the two, and so I think you get a fresh start with Brian Thomas, and I think he was in that class two of wide receivers entering this draft as well, and so I think it was a nice pickup for them where they got him.
yeah, yeah, he's also an honorable mention of mine. Um, if you think about their wide receiver room now, like with the strides that Parker Washington's going to make this season,
Mhm.
it's night and day, and especially with the Gabe Davis move as well, they're really focused on like complementing their roster. Where you got Christian Kirk as the immediate route runner threat, you got Gabe Davis as a deep threat, and then now
Mhm.
you got Brian Thomas, so you hope it can be the do it all guy, and then Parker Washington who can win in multiple different ways. So that's a good quartet to help support Trevor Lawrence, and I'm a fan of the move.
Mhm.
My number one landing spot was a lot of controversy. A lot of controversy. He was taken in the top 10. People were questioning whether he should have even been taken in the first round at all based on his injury history. But if you look at where he landed, strictly from that, and not the team that picked him and what their financial like decisions were, and the team around him, you have to go Michael Penix. You just have to go Michael Penix because he's going to Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and then you got a running back with all world capabilities and B. John Robinson. That is a great landing spot of guys you can throw to and a plan to build around that. I get it. He might not even start this year, and I'm still saying that's a good landing spot for him. Look at look at the good quarterbacks that have developed and got the time to sit down. And I'd argue Penix has more talent than most of them coming out of the draft. And he gets the chance to learn the game mentally and get his body under him and see the game from a physical standpoint and what the differences are between college before getting thrown in the fire. I think it's a great move. I think it was a great move to get him. You could
Mhm.
argue that the Falcons could have maximized their value to get Penix by like trading down a couple spots and picking him right before like Denver, Las Vegas, and like Minnesota. But who's to say that Minnesota, Las Vegas, and Denver would in front of them? Oh, we got Corstian back on there, but my like they could have easily jumped the Falcons wherever they like traded back. To grab Penix. There were a lot of reports of teams who were gonna pick Penix for like 13. So
Mhm.
I think I don't really mind where he landed as far as like pick placement. I think
Hmm.
the landing spot was crucial, and I think Atlanta's doing their due diligence. And it's almost like Kirk Cousins is coming off an Achilles at 36 years old and not being any guarantees. Like Atlanta had to make the moves they made in free agency because of how abysmal their quarterback situation was last year. This is a win now roster, and it's a lot of pressure to force that on Penix.
Hmm.
Where you already made a coaching change. So get a veteran quarterback who has experience with win now teams, and then develop your guy in the future. You don't have to run into the Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke situation any longer.
Yeah. Well, like they have a good team, but I wouldn't say like they're in a desperate win now situation just with like how young all their guys are on like how their core's a pretty young core. Like I feel like a team with a lot
I
more
just mean from
vets.
the standpoint like with better quarterback play, they would have won the division last year, flat out.
Hmm.
They would have ran away with the division had they had better quarterback play than they did.
Hmm.
That's why I look at it as like, oh, this is a they could win the division now with good
Hmm.
quarterback play.
Yeah. I guess yeah from that standpoint, but yeah, I think it's I mean the whole thing is get your guy. I think I would have liked to see JJ McCarthy here a little bit more for the Falcons.
Meaning
Like
JJ at 8 or JJ on the Falcons rather than the
JJ at
Panthers?
8.
Okay.
Like, and I'm not even that big of a JJ fan. Like, um, and I think my reasoning though is just like looking at how old these guys are, and I understand like these guys could play for a decade and whatnot, but investing like top 10 draft capital on a guy who's not gonna who could potentially not see any playing time till he's like 26 or 27 years old feels like quite the investment to make at the number 8 spot. Um, and so it's like going from being like a 26, 27-year-old quarterback getting your first starts versus you talked about other guys who got time to wait, but that's like the ones that come to mind are Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, both Packers guys. But you think about they were drafted, you know, past the halfway point of the first round. And once they got their first starts, they're as old as Michael Penix is right now, and he is just a rookie. And so I think that's where the value discrepancy you kind of start to see in comparisons, especially because a lot of people perceive top 10 picks to be insta start guys that are supposed to be difference makers right now. And then, like you said, with them being a win now team, I think a lot of people think that um, the Falcons should have gone for a player that contributes to that current win now mindset, like a guy like Dallas Turner or Laiatu Latu, who can instantly make an impact for a playoff push, than a quarterback that'll ride the bench for a couple of years and start when he's 26. But again, I like the sentiment of get your guy if you love your guy. The Falcons reportedly had Penix as their number 2 quarterback, and so if he's your number 2 guy and he's fallen technically
I
to
had him at
8th.
number 2 in this draft class as well. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
it was probably a tie with Jaden Daniels, but like I had him
Hmm.
right up there as well.
Hmm.
Like I thought it was like to be honest, I thought it was like kind of a steal that they got him at 8, if you really think about it. Because like Drake May, we don't know what's gonna happen. JJ, we don't know what's gonna happen. Um, like, and I think the Giants made a mistake like picking Malik Neighbors rather than their quarterback. But that's a story for another day.
Hmm.
I think Penix should have like you saw that I had him going at 3 to the Patriots.
Hmm.
Okay? Like that's how good I thought he was.
Hmm.
And I hear you like in a vacuum, he would have to sit 3 to 4 years and then start. But
Hmm.
again, may I remind you, Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles.
Hmm.
Normally, those are serious injuries where you cannot move the same.
Hmm.
If you want to
Was he
argue
moving in the
that
first
Atlanta
place?
made a
Like,
dumb decision to pay him the amount of money he did coming off a torn Achilles, I 100% hear you. I
hmm.
100% hear you. That's a legitimate argument. The amount of money they pay
Hmm.
Kirk Cousins
Hmm.
because dang, he has got a good agent. But
Hmm.
as far as like a team building perspective, you don't want to place all your eggs on one basket with Kirk Cousins. You just
Hmm.
don't, especially when he's coming off a torn Achilles. Like you need to have a backup plan in this situation. And I
Hmm.
applaud the Falcons for having the balls to do it.
Hmm.
And Penix is a really talented player. This is nothing. This is nothing about Penix as a talent. This is just like Atlanta's financial decision. I think that people are calling into questions. But as far as
Mhm.
the football, the landing spot, I think I think he's good. I
Mhm.
think he's going to be really good because you saw what he did with like three top 100 wide receivers. Like I think at one point each of his receivers at Washington were averaging 100 yards per game. Each of them
Mhm.
100 yards per game.
Mhm.
And they had a great running back out of Washington, Dylan Johnson, just signed undrafted free agent contract. Should have gone drafted, but they have all these weapons, and they have one of the best run blocking units in the league. The one thing Atlanta's missing is a quarterback, and I can't fault them for trying to take two bites at the apple just to
Mhm.
have better quarterback play than they had last year. If you really look at this Atlanta team, they're a playoff team with better quarterback play than they had last year.
Mhm.
And I think they're trying to ensure that they get that production this year, whether it's Kirk
Mhm.
Cousins or whether it's Michael Penix. So I don't look at it as, oh, he might play 3 years from now. I look at it from he might be playing next season
Mhm.
because of what happens to Kirk, or even sooner before that. But
Mhm.
the intent is to have him learn the system, give him time to get used to the NFL scheme, and then throw him in smartly when you feel he's ready.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can't fault them for that. And plus, you get the cost control and the 50-year option too. That's something that can't be overlooked as well. Because
Mhm.
if he plays well, or if you don't know, you could just extend him a 5th year and find out.
Mhm.
Like I don't think Atlanta's picking in this position again, like over
Mhm.
the next couple seasons, because
Yeah.
realistically, they're probably picking in the teens or lower than that with the way their team is constructed.
Mhm.
So I think this might be the best chance they get to get a quarterback of like Penix's caliber. And I don't think you
Mhm.
throw that away just because you have a guy in the spot right now. You never know what's going to
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm. Yeah. And so yeah, I say like get your guy, but it's an interesting situation. I think yeah, it's more so the Cousins contract that you dish out, and then you
And
don't
and
tell
that
Cousins
too.
what your intentions are either, which I think was the big red flag from the Falcons owner or management team.
I think they told him, but like I think from that stand, like Kirk is going overboard with that. Like that's another side of the issue. Like one, his contract is front loaded the first 2 years, so I think they can get out of it easier in the third year. And knowing those details make this move
Mhm.
less as bad financially. But I think from
Yeah.
the Kirk Cousins, like you're a veteran of a team. You got drafted after Robert Griffin III in the same draft. Like
Mhm.
you think Robert Griffin the third threw no the third threw a tirade when they drafted you in the 4th round of the same draft? I don't think so. I don't think so because he understood this team and this is what you got to do to team build. Now
Also,
his
it's a
questions
fourth round
about
pick
Caleb
though.
Williams, his questions about Caleb Williams and like off the field, like his spouts with like Jay Gruden, it's like that's like popcorn
Mhm.
washing. But like you've had a long career. You got the opportunity to start. You got the chance to sit behind and see this. You got the chance to be the starter in like Minnesota. Like, and you got the chance to lead different groups of football teams. You should know better than that. Like, you don't leak that out to the public. You don't comment on that. Like, yeah, you tried to do damage control by calling Penix and whatnot, but like they got you in here to be the leader of the team and get this team to the playoffs. That's not a good
Mhm.
look when you're starting out and being like, "Whoa, I'm completely shocked by this," because you should know nothing is guaranteed in the NFL. Like everybody thought Robert Griffin III was a sure thing at 2, and next thing you know, the 4th round pick is starting keeping this team afloat.
Mhm.
So from like a leadership perspective, like Kirk, you gotta do better than that, man. You've been in the league like too long to be like complaining about like them taking a quarterback in the top 10 when you
Mhm.
yourself have been the beneficiary of that. And you're trying to lead a team that's not been in the playoffs for quite some time back into
Mhm.
it. Like they haven't
Yeah.
they haven't been in the playoffs since the 23-3 fiasco. Like I wouldn't want a quarterback that's like complaining about his like job security.
Mhm.
Like when he hasn't even played a snap on the team. Like
Mhm.
that's alarming to me.
Yeah, I mean, but then I mean, you don't say those things to like Aaron Rodgers or like when they draft first round quarterback and he was literally the same exact byproduct of what happened with him,
But
and
that's
so
that's different though. I feel like that's it because like they were in the NFC Championship game. They were
hmm
winning a lot of games, and I hate to say this as a Bears fan, obviously,
hmm
but like they were winning 13 games each and
hmm
every season, and you clearly saw a need where they needed wide receiver help and whatnot.
hmm
And with Atlanta, they addressed their needs in the second rounds and after. They did that, which was on the defensive line and different layers of the defense. They did that. With Green Bay, it was a different story because you clearly saw they needed wide receiving help, and
hmm
they purposely avoided that because they didn't want to pay Aaron Rodgers and guarantee the money and the contract he was looking
hmm
for. Like that was like a more situation where like the GM was like openly feuding with the player on like how to build the team.
hmm
With like this Kirk Cousins situation, like you don't know what's gonna happen. He's 36, man. He's
hmm
36. Like you're like giving out the 4-year contract and that amount of money is one thing, right?
hmm
But I think you're protecting your assets, protecting your investments by doing this quarterback,
hmm
like picking another quarterback and actually having a future there because Atlanta did not have a future in the quarterback situation last year. That's for sure. They were content with below average quarterback play despite the opportunity of getting Lamar. So
hmm
I think they're saying we made a mistake not trading for Lamar. So one, we're gonna get Kirk Cousins to get better quarterback play and guarantee ourselves that. And two, we're gonna make sure we have better quarterback play for the next 10 to 15 years by
hmm
getting Penix. And
Yeah.
I just think it's like apples to oranges when you're trying to compare it to like a Green Bay situation or like Kansas City, um,
hmm
with like the differences in like when they start and versus like Penix's age or like um or like the fact that um the players are complaining about a player being taken at their position.
hmm
Like I like it's not Kurt's Cousins' job to mentor the guy. Like he's not supposed to mentor the guy,
hmm
but at the same time, you got to lead an entire football team through like
hmm
a rough stretch of season to a team that hasn't been in the playoffs in quite some time with inexperienced offensive players. They're
hmm
just starving for a quarterback to get them the ball and get them out of space.
hmm
You think you think Kyle Pitts wants to have the season he had last year and the year before that? I don't think so. I do not think so. So like they're looking for a leader like that, and um, maybe this might be all water under the bridge, and Kirk's able to like manage the situation there. But
hmm
I think from starting out, like that wasn't a good look because it showed like you're kind of like about the money and like the guarantee of starting rather than like the betterment of the football team.
hmm
And like you want to be supportive of the players that get picked. It's not
hmm
your job to mentor them and then they become the next great thing or whatnot. It's not your job, but
Yeah.
like you want to be a good from a leader standpoint. I think that was my issue with like how Kirk Cousins reacted to it. No,
Yeah. But also, I do think that Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets, if they had drafted a quarterback first round after signing like the mega contracts, I think it's kind of disrespect. Like in hindsight, yes, they technically should have, but I still think it's a disrespectful move to be like, we're not actually committed to you 100% because we're going to draft a guy basically to be a replacement right now, which I feel
yeah,
like which I feel like hurts Kirk Cousins' motivation and his like his whole like mojo of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be the guy here. I'm gonna help fix this franchise, and then the franchise says, actually, we don't think you can. So we're gonna draft a guy top 10 to replace you, even though
but
we
I don't
just
think
told
that
you
was
we're.
the GM's expectation though. That's the thing because I
Mhm,
get it. Like typically, like top 10 players, you want them to be instant impact. But like
mhm,
if you look at San Francisco with Trey Lance, and then
mhm,
you like they didn't expect him to start immediately. They're having him play behind Jimmy G and whatnot. I
yeah.
think with the Jets, that's a different story because um, with Aaron Rodgers, you have an established player with MVP capabilities. Kirk
Mhm,
Cousins has flirted on playing at that level, but he's not on Aaron Rodgers' level. So that's a different story. That's an entirely different story. But like with signing with the Jets, like if I was team like I would still pick a guy like second or third round and whatnot. I think the context is key here with the draft classes because the quarterback classes haven't been that great recently. Like before the 2020 draft class, and even that one was kind of underwhelming to be honest, considering that we had like five quarterbacks and we were all excited about those quarterbacks. Like before that, the draft class has not been great at all. Like you got Winston, Mariota, then you got like the Kenny Pickett draft class and stuff like. There's just not like a ideal time to pick a quarterback from the Jets. So I think from Atlanta's thinking, it's we have no idea what to expect in the next couple of years with draft classes. We need to do this now because we think Penix might be the best one out of the next two or three draft classes, which
Mm-hmm.
is a scouting bet on them. Like
Mm-hmm.
that they think that he could be better than Shadur Sanders might be in a year, or
Mm-hmm.
like Arch Manning might be in like 2 or 3 years or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. That's the bet they're willing to take on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're going in with the intent that looking, observing throughout the league and seeing how do the best quarterbacks develop. They sit behind for a couple of years. It's like, okay, let's do that with Penix, control the fifth year option while supporting Kirk Cousins with a win
Mm-hmm.
now team. So
Yeah. But this move just makes me think that the Falcons don't think they win it all this year, or they're not a contender this year. That's all. But yeah.
I don't I think they're trying to protect themselves, like if
Mm-hmm.
Kirk Cousins get hurt, so they don't end up in the Desmond Ritter situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think this move tells me. I think they could still win the division.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're out of the running of that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I think the Achilles is a lot more serious than people are considering in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
They're just looking at this on paper and it's like, why do you have two quarterbacks that are starter worthy on the same team without
Mm-hmm.
taking into account the context of the situation
Mm-hmm.
and how you get a winning quarterback for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, but going back to the landing spot, I think going to Pitts and throwing to London and like having Bijan on the same team, like that's a
Mm-hmm.
great environment to develop your skills under.
Mm-hmm.
Like it takes a year, and who knows, it
Mm-hmm.
might take next a year to to get ready because like he was
Mm-hmm.
instantly good at Indiana, instantly good at Washington. Um, could be a lot faster than 3 years here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that wraps up our 10 players. With that we liked our landing spots. Now we're gonna go in teams with the best drafts. So Corsan and I both have a list of 3 teams that we like the best. Corsan, do you want to take it away with um, a team that you thought had one of the best draft classes in the league?
um, I think the Chiefs have one of the best drafts in the league this season. I have their draft pulled up right here.
That's gotta feel awful to
Um,
say right now, doesn't it?
yeah, because I was looking at their picks and I'm like, dang, like they got a lot of guys that I had high. Um, first off, like one of your favorite players, Xavier Worthy, he goes to the Chiefs and he has the chance to be an instant superstar playmaker for them right here. And then you got Kingsley Suamataia, the guy who some mocks had him going at their first round pick 32 spot. And the fact that they get him at the very end of the second round, I think was a great value there. Jared Wiley, I think he's all right, fourth round tight end, and he's not like a guy that's expected to be starter day one. He just kind of can take time to to develop, which I think was really good. And then the other pick I really liked from them was Jaden Hicks. I thought he was one of the top safeties in this class, and then he goes all the way at the back end of the fourth round. A guy that I think a lot of people had expected to go maybe mid to early second, going all the way there. And obviously, I guess teams didn't like him as much as fans did, but still, I think that was just a guy that can be a contributor, especially because you have to necessarily start right away, and so he has time to develop and then become the guy I think that we all expected him that would be a second round kind of talent.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Again, we talked about Xavier Worthy earlier. I think he's going to be a real difference maker in like how the receivers play in their offense right now. Um, they did a lot of O line refinement and then like DBs in this draft class, which is good. after losing Snead, they definitely needed to make some moves to address that. So I really like the Jaden Hicks pick myself too. I thought that was definitely a steal in the fourth round. Um, and on top of Worthy, and I haven't watched too much of their other picks, but I know from like the position need, they picked like three O linemen in this draft class. Um, they definitely made it a priority because you don't want to be stuck in like the Jawan Taylor situation that they were in last year. So um, I think they just again teams like build on their weaknesses and double down on them so they don't get egos in the way. I'm like, oh, the player they choose to address this position, he has to pan out, otherwise I lose my job. They ensure themselves by doubling down and saying, hey, you're competing with this guy. You better outright beat him. And in so, you're going to get better as a player. And I think that's what's going to happen with this O line. You're going to have a lot of cross matching where they're going to play multiple positions. And you're just going to say, let the best people win. Like, if you think about what the Chiefs did in one single offseason after losing to Tampa Bay, and we got sideways Corstian here as he fixes himself. If you think about what the Chiefs did the offseason after losing to Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl, they pretty much rebuilt their offensive line overnight with like Creed
Mhm.
Humphrey. Um, uh, First name is Trey Smith. Um, and then like the moves they made on the interior line, like unbelievable. Unbelievable. So like I think they're just planning for the future and like what their O line looks like after that. And they're looking well ahead of time, addressing their wide receiver needs early in the draft. That was a key thing that they need to do. Um, and then yeah, I really liked your choice. That's a good thing. Um, I don't think they had as great of a draft as their interdivision rivals there with the Chargers.
Mhm.
They're my number three team. Um, you just look at the first three picks. I think that's all you need to say here. But then there's a couple of guys at the end of the draft I really liked as well. So like Joe Alt, Lam McConkey, Junior Colson, all-star, instant stars. Knew Jim Harbaugh had to pick a guy from Michigan at the end, but he immediately identified who was the best like parts of this defense last year. Um, Joe Alt was a big move because they're probably going to have one of the best like tackle duos in the league with this, with Rashawn Slater and like Joe Alt. I think they might put Alt on the right tackle because Slater's already had 2 years of being experienced left tackle. So that might be something they'll have to think about carefully. But the way they constructed this team after the amount of weapons they lost on offense, really nice. And then to round out the end of the draft as well, um, going with Kamani Badal in the sixth round, that is a pick I really liked. I like him as a better version of DeAndre Swift because he's a better runner inside the tackles and he can give you a lot of what Swift can do as well. Brendan Rice is a sneaky good pick. Um, he had a
Mhm.
famous dad that's played in the NFL for a long time. So he turned out to be pretty good, and I think Rice will be the same thing. And then Cornelius Johnson, a wide receiver from Michigan. Again, doubling down on the wide receivers, sneaky ad. She's had a lot of upside, but not necessarily production that's going to
Mhm.
translate right away. But I think he's in a great environment where he can be better. I think this is Jim Harbaugh saying, "Hey, I saw the talent level in this guy. Like when I've coached him at Michigan, I think he's going to do a lot of good things for us." So
Mhm.
um, the Chargers have to be three on my board right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I had the Chargers in my honorary mention there. It was really between them and the Chiefs, and then I had a hunch a while ago that you might say the Chargers, so I thought maybe making them my honorary mention because I really liked it really was up between it was like the Chargers, Chiefs, and maybe the Bills. I think were like my three that were like I think they all had really good drafts, but it was like I really wanted to talk about my other two teams that I liked, and so it was between one of those three, and I ended up going with the Chiefs there. But yeah, I think they were a good that was a good choice.
Mhm. Who you got
Um,
at two?
Number two, I went and did the Carolina Panthers.
Wow.
um, they're a team with a lot of question marks. Obviously, nobody knows how they'll do this season, but like they had a lot of holes. They had a lot of players leave, and so they start out, they trade into the first round, get Xavier Leggett, get another guy in that wide receiver room that I think was very much needed. I know you got Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen's there, and then you're hoping that Jonathan Mingo is able to step it up, I guess, year two. But then
Mhm.
Johnson's on that 1 year, Thielen's still getting older, and then Mingo's still developing. So you really don't know what's going to happen with this receiver room, and so you kind of start things off with getting a much needed receiver here. And then I liked them taking the first running back off the board as well. Obviously, Hubbard has played pretty decent over the past few seasons, and then you got Miles Sanders there, but I wouldn't
But that
say
was a
either.
position of need for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't say either one's really that breakout star. And so Jonathan Brooks, I think, can come in and be that guy. And especially, he doesn't have a lot of like miles on his legs right now. And so, he can, in theory, play for quite a while in the NFL. And so, if Bryce Young is able to develop into an elite passer, you'll have him and then Jonathan Brooks as kind of a not a wide receiver, a quarterback running back duo that can last quite a while, which I think will be a nice little pass rush or passing and a rushing combo. I liked Traven Wallace. He's just the Frankie Louvu, I think, replacement. They lost their star linebacker in free agency. This is just the guy that he plays similar type of ball. And then you got Jatavian Sanders, who I think he's just a solid fourth round, tight end option that you can get here. And then you just kind of address more depth and needs further down the board with, Charles Smith Wade, Jaden Crumedy, and then Michael Barrett. All guys that are more upside than like instant starters right now. But overall, I thought it was a draft that addressed a decent amount of needs. I think the one thing they did miss though is getting a solid pass rusher in this class. With losing Brian Burns, you'd expect them to maybe go that route, but then you look at the guys they picked and you're like, well, it's kind of hard to see where they'd fit that in, maybe in the second round, but then, you're losing out on
Yeah.
your potential running back of the future there.
Yeah. I would say this to their roster. Um, I like the first two picks for sure. I think Jonathan Brooks definitely becomes the best running back on the roster. And the nice thing about it is he doesn't have to even start right away. Like
Mm-hmm.
they could just run it back with Miles Sanders and like Chuba Hubbard for the first couple games while Brooks is recovering from his ACL tear. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
like they'll be fine. They'll be fine. They have great depth at that position now. That's going to be huge for alleviating stress on Bryce Young.
Mm-hmm.
And Xavier Leggett, he's another one of those guys like in the underrated list of wide receivers not mentioned because you got Neighbors, Adunze, and Marvin Harrison. Great receiver. He's had a lot of off the field like bad luck. That's like a lot of personal issues that he's had to deal with, and I mentioned it before. His production dipped as a result. So I think this is a sneaky get for them that can really be a one or a two on their offense in like a couple years. I know I said that about Mingo, but like think about Mingo and Leggett 3 years from now being the starting. I could see that happening with another addition, and maybe Deontay Johnson stays for a bit. And then you
Mm-hmm.
got a guy with Sanders. I think he upgrades their tight end room. Their
Mm-hmm.
weapons just got extremely better. They've already addressed the offensive line. Their offense
Mm-hmm.
is going to be like significantly better. I'm projecting them to be like a 6 to 7 win team right now because of that pass rush you mentioned. That pass rush is going to dictate a whole lot because they got great corners in JC
Mm-hmm.
Horn, and then they had Stephon Gilmore for a while, but like before he moved last season. But like they're right on the cusp of having a breakthrough on offense and giving Bryce Young like improved passing yardage. It's just on that defense now, and I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could have addressed more in that area, but
Mm-hmm.
and I completely forgot to put you like on the
Oh.
number two team there, but it's okay. Corstian's number two team was the Carolina Panthers. For those of you like following along, you're like saying, "Why is this on Josh's team?" You talked about two teams here,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Carolina's done a fabulous job like navigating the fact that they didn't have as many picks because of the DJ Moore trade that happened, um, turning out to be a massive win for the Chicago. But I think as far as like rebuilding the team, they're off to a great start. So I like that pick. For my number team, I'm gonna go with the Philadelphia Eagles. We talked about it a little bit earlier when we were talking about Cooper DeJean, but
Hmm.
to start off your draft with like Quinyon Mitchell and then Cooper DeJean, get like the two cornerbacks off the board because the amount of first round offensive talent that was going, like with the first 40 picks, was unbelievable. Like that's to start off there was insane. But then you go back in the fifth round and then you get Anais Smith again, another one of like I don't think we talked about him as much, but like he's another one of those underrated receivers in that list of 10 underrated receivers from this draft class. Really great receiver. Double down on the Smiths in Philadelphia, but with good players, the last name Smith, that's awesome. And then you get go back and get Johnny Wilson, wide receiver out of Florida State. He wasn't talked about as much with Keon Coleman still in the show, but he is also a fantastic receiver. I had no idea why he ended up in the sixth round. Um, and then a lot of people love the Jeremiah Trotter pick out of Clemson. So like I just look at these picks down the board, and they're great selections. Even the Jalen Hunt pick, I haven't watched much of him, but from what I've seen, like a lot of people like that move, especially when you lose like Bryce Huff in free agency. Or no, you add Bryce Huff, they lost somebody else. But I think this is a great great draft class for the Eagles. I have to put them at two.
Yeah, yeah, they had a solid class. They addressed a lot of needs, and like I think I said earlier that a lot of teams benefit. A lot of teams that needed defensive help really benefited this draft. That were kind of further down the board, just because there was that insane run of 14 straight offensive players uh,
Mm.
taken in the first round. But um, yeah, going with my last favorite draft class team. Here I'm picking the Arizona Cardinals. I think they made the right choice in not trading down and getting Marvin Harrison Jr. He is the guy, and I think, sure, you could technically trade down to get, like maybe like the tier two or tier three guy, but like he's like part of that tier one group of wide receivers, and I feel like there's more of that. There's less risk associated with him being a bust, I think, than a guy further down the road, like uh, you might have there might be part of Brian Thomas's game even that you're concerned about, or you go further down the list of like guys like Keon Coleman, where they're good. We all think that these guys are can be great football players, but I feel like you risk a little bit less when you're taking a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Dunce, and Malik Neighbors' tier one group. So I like that for them. But more than that, I like their pick of Darius Robinson, just getting solid edge player here. Getting a guy that likely falls farther down into the first. I didn't necessarily have him going in the first round, but you're able to get your guys like the Lions last season. They went and got their guys, and I think that's what the Cardinals ended up doing here, because I really liked Max Melton out of Rutgers at cornerback, Trey Benson in the third round. James Conner's the guy right now, but he's good, but he's not always on the field, and so I really like that for them. And then I
And
like the
Keontae Ingram, who's supposed to be his like heir apparent, um, for some reason hasn't shined yet. I was expecting him
Mhm.
to. I was expecting him to take over the backfield for Connor, but Benson's definitely that talented. So yeah,
Mhm.
I love that move for them as well. What are any other players that stood out for you in the draft class?
Yeah, I liked their selection of Isaiah Adams, and I really liked their pick of Christian Jones, both offensive tackles. I think both those guys
Mm.
down the road can be starters. Christian Jones might move, or Isaiah Adams, they might move inside to guard if one excels at tackle, and then they got their left tackle set right now. Jonah Williams is on the other side right now, and so these guys potentially one of them moves inside, but then I could see the other guy sticking on the outside, and you get two starting offensive linemen within one class, and not taking or spending super high draft capital on them either.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, two additional players I liked from the draft class. I'm looking at it. Elijah Jones is a great corner from Boston
Mm-hmm.
College. That was to get him in the third round, a good move on them. And then oh shoot, the NFL.com ad popped up. Um, but to pair that up with Dadrian Taylor Demerson, we didn't really talk about him in our mock drafts, but
Mhm.
the more I was watching him on like highlight tapes of this guy, I was like, this is going to be a huge get. And then when you're looking at their secondary, it's got quickly revamped, dude. Like Jalen Thompson, Buda Baker have already like cemented starters on that defense, and then you add a guy like this, and then like I think they had Byron Murphy, but like the cornerback situation is pretty good as well. Before you made that move with Elijah Jones, so I think from offense to defense, great additions, and then of course we can't forget about Max Melton there. So
Mhm.
they definitely did a good job of like adding a position of need to help support Kyler Murray. I think the only thing they missed on my regard was probably a backup quarterback. And I know they have Clayton Tune, but I probably would have taken one more from this draft class
Mhm.
just to prepare for like anything that happens to Kyler Murray. I think
Mhm.
they could have pushed for Rattler. They could even push for Austin Reed, who went undrafted. He's not on the
Mhm.
Bears roster. But I think Arizona would have done their due diligence to pick that. But the new
Mhm.
GM, Monty Ossenfort's done a tremendous job, like trading
Mhm.
back with his other picks, accumulating as much value as it can, and just
Mhm.
taking like great players across the board. There's really not one player I dislike from the draft class. So that's a fair
Mhm.
number one. I actually have a different number one, which
Mhm.
we didn't even plan this at all, which is hilarious that we didn't have any overlap there. But my number one team has to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Has to be.
Mhm.
If you look at the moves they made, they got two Wilsons on top of that. I'm sure you're happy that both of your cousins got picked in the draft. But before that, you look at Fontanu, offensive tackle out of Washington, baller. Zach Frazier,
Mhm.
best center in the draft class out of West Virginia. Pat McAfee's happy about that, baller. Roman Wilson out of Michigan, baller. Get him in the third round, and then you pair that up with a compensatory pick with Peyton Wilson, baller, and then Mason McCormick, underrated guard, South Dakota State, baller. Just those like first like five picks in the draft, top to bottom, one of the best selections they made. Like I could have put the Bears up there, but then they decided to pick a punter in the fourth round. So I'm like, no, you can't do that. Like pick the punter in the fifth round or the sixth round. Come on, you guys. But with the Steelers, like I think their offensive line is going to be one of the best in the league very quickly.
Mhm.
Because you basically got three starters on the offensive line in this draft. That's how good I think Fatana, Frazier, and McCormick will be. Mason McCormick should have gone a lot higher than he did. And then
Mhm.
to compensate for the horrible injury that happened to Ryan Chase here, they finally addressed that in free agency with the pickup of Patrick Queen, and then they doubled down and went on Peyton Wilson. So now you
Mhm.
really supported Alex Highsmith and T.J. Watt um,
Mhm.
on your linebacking cores. I don't think the middle of the field is going to be an area you want to throw against the Steelers, and it's been a long
Mhm.
time since we said that since the Shazier
Mhm.
injury. So um, just from like the trenches, like and helping the running game and helping like the run stop defense, Steelers like they have the best draft class to me in the NFL.
Mhm. Yeah, theirs is really good. I really liked their picks. I was talking earlier before we started recording how I was watching like a live stream of some people just like watching or reacting to the draft as it was going, and one of them was a Steelers fan, and he was super hyped, uh, looking at the picks of Roman Wilson, Peyton Wilson. Uh, just I think those are really insane, nice value picks that they got. And I see why both those players fell a bit in the draft, but still, I mean, it's guys that just have potential to be day one starters, which is really nice for them.
And the Steelers are notorious for picking like the best wide receivers, like and knowing how
Hmm.
to develop them as well. So like
Hmm.
even if Roman Wilson was the best wide receiver in the draft class, who cares? They're gonna make him good anyway. They're gonna make him good anyway. Like it does. It seemingly doesn't matter with this team. And I think supporting Russell Wilson and Justin Fields right at the gate, they know like their offensive line was a weakness. Uh, they did a Chiefs like rebuild of this offensive line very quickly, with three out of the five selections being starters on their offensive line, pretty much. Like this is going to be a great offensive line with depth, and it's going to protect Russell Wilson and Justin Fields for years to come. This is probably the best
Mm-hmm.
offensive lines they've had in years. Doesn't matter who's starting.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a great team.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was my number one. I had to give it to the Steelers. They picked up
Mm-hmm.
every single guy they picked in the top 5 picks was like guys I loved, and I was like,
Yeah.
"You kidding me?" Like, that's amazing. So like obviously the caveat to all of this is like we have our preferences on players we like and players that we have confidence that they'll be good. But we know that not every player is going to pan out. This is what
Mm-hmm.
makes the draft such a mystery and such intrigue when you look at this 3 or 5 years from now. So yes, we're definitely going to judge these players from their first game and then label them as such after they get drafted. And that will be the end. They can never develop, they can never get better from there. But
Mm-hmm.
all jokes aside, it will be very exciting to see how these last two draft classes we covered pan out in the next 3 years. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think last year's draft class, you want to get a little bit more seasoning on that, but like based on how CJ Stroud's played, and like the potential that Anthony Richardson has and like all these guys, it will be exciting to see where the league goes from here. So
Mm-hmm.
with that,
Yeah.
thank you guys for watching. We enjoy having you guys on our podcast listening to us. Um, right there, I put our Instagram handle, Iman.a.mission there. Um, ooh,
Ooh.
there you go. Yeah, that'd be good. Go ahead and like it up. Um, we're gonna start updating those. We have to. It's the least we can do. Also, be sure to subscribe so you can get those celebratory videos at the end that Corstian's starting with filming on his Apple iPhone every time. Wish I could do that. But and anyhow, you can find us at Amon A Mission. That's 3 words there. Subscribe to us. Give us a comment on some of our videos. What do you think? Who are your favorite players? Do you think they're a different team on the draft that's not the Cardinals and the Steelers? If so, let us know. And with that, we will see you guys next week.
Yeah. Peace.
Peace, guys. Have a good one.